Welcome back, everyone. This is the X Zone. I am Rob McConnell. We're coming to you from our broadcast center and studios in Crystal Beach, Ontario, Canada. If you'd like to contact us, X Zone at X Zone Radio TV on all social media sites, X Zone Radio TV. To find out about the programming we have available for you 24/7, 365 on the X Zone Broadcast Network, visit www.xzbn.net. And for the programming of the X Zone TV channel and SimulTV, simultv.com. My guest this hour is longtime MUFON board member Tim Whitmore, and he had been a San Antonio, Texas resident since 1984. Now, originally from Tulsa, Tom graduated with a degree in business administration from Portland State University and had a career in the financial industry since the 1970s. He was most recently employed as a financial analyst with a local firm in San Antonio, where he retired in 2019. He is an accomplished guitarist and has a daughter who is a preschool teacher. Tom was invited to join MUFON board in 1995 and experienced the organization's progress through the successive administration of Walt Andrus, all the way through to the present day of Jan Harzan. He serves as treasurer and focuses on long-term and strategic issues for the organization. Now, Tom has been fascinated by military and intelligence agencies' interactions with the UFO public. He has undertaken a research study of the history of the MJ-12 affair and intends to eventually publish his findings. He participates in discussions on the MJ-12 topic by giving presentations to local UFO groups, appearing on internet, podcast, and radio shows, and by communicating in social media. Now, you can find out everything you'd like to know about Tom on his site. It's www.tomwhitmoreblog.wordpress.com. And joining me now is Tom Whitmore. And Tom, welcome back, or welcome to the X Zone, I should say.
Hello, Rob, and thank you so much for having me on the show. I'm just delighted to be here.
It's a great pleasure having you, sir. And wow, you certainly have paid your dues. And I kind of envy you because you're retired. And here I am, still here, 5 nights a week, 4 hours a night. And when I say to my wife I'm going to retire, she says, no. So good for you, pal.
Thanks. I know a lot of people don't know what to do with themselves when they retire, but I do have a purpose in life here. So
I can certainly see that. How did you get interested in the UFO topic, Tom?
Well, I've been interested since I was about 11 years old.
Mm-hmm.
I was at a friend's house and I saw a book by Donald Kehoe, Flying Saucers Top Secret. And that piqued my interest, and I started reading Donald Kehoe's books. And back then in the 60s and 70s, UFOs were in the mainstream media quite a bit, quite a bit more than they have been, in the 80s and 90s and so on. So I didn't get active in the field until around 1990. Now, in the 1980s, I happened to turn on the TV and see the UFO Cover-Up Live program. And then a little bit later, I was walking down the street and I saw a UFO magazine and I bought it and read it. And it had a lot of the current rumors at the time about crash saucers and alien bodies and underground bases and all this. And I got really interested in that because I've been reading history, since I was a young person, stacks of history books. And I learned a lot about how governments operate in their own interests. And I started getting interested in espionage and psychological warfare, and combining that with possible intelligence agency and military involvement in the UFO field. It all came together for me.
And how long have you been with MUFON, and what was your motivation to join MUFON in the first place?
Well, when I started really getting interested in the field and I decided to become active, I really started reading UFO literature. I started keeping up on the field, and I found out about MUFON. Now, I was living in San Antonio, and MUFON was being run out of Seguin, Texas by Walt Andrus at that time. And Walt would attend the local meetings in San Antonio, so I started attending the local meetings, and I had the privilege of getting to know him. And eventually I was able to become the state section director. I had passed the field investigators exam, and I was doing some field investigations and running the local group. During that time, Mr. Robert Bigelow began to get involved with the UFO groups, and he started funding certain research projects. And Walt Andrus asked me to administer some of the disbursement of the funds, and then later I was invited onto the board in 1995.
So, what is it about MUFON that has caused you to be involved with the organization for such a long time? Like, how many years have you been with MUFON?
Well, I've been with MUFON since the early 90s. So, this is, you go back from 2019 and
my goodness,
it's going on 30 years. So it has been a long time. And I feel that the UFO field is a crazy field. And being on the MUFON board and being involved with MUFON, we have normal, sober, business type problems to address, but also with the craziness in the field, it's easy to just want to walk off and quit because as a volunteer, and I'm a volunteer, and the board members are not paid, and I want to make that clear. In fact, I've spent many thousands of dollars of my own money serving on the board over these many years, but as a volunteer, it's very easy to just walk off and quit. And I didn't think that was right. And once I got on the board, I decided to stick with it. And MUFON has had its ups and downs over the years, as many people know. But the board has been pretty stable over the last number of years, and we have really stuck with it. And now, after 50 years, MUFON is still here.
How is MUFON, in your opinion, fulfilling its mission?
Well, MUFON does basically three things. We maintain and administer a network of field investigators. We publish a MUFON monthly journal and website, and we put on an annual symposium. Now, within our field investigation network, and we have a number of state directors, upwards of 40 state directors, and then many other state section directors. But we take in anywhere from 500 to 1,000 case reports every month. And then we publish articles, and we publish sighting reports in the monthly journal. And then at our annual symposium, we invite top-level presenters, prominent researchers and prominent scientists in the UFO field to speak at our annual symposium. And we also publish a booklet of the symposium proceedings every year. And in addition to that, we publish an excellent field investigators manual. And it's kind of ironic because when I hear some of the criticisms of MUFON, I can tell that people don't own a copy of the Field Investigators Manual. It's extremely detailed, it's very specific, and it provides excellent training and preparation for UFO field investigators.
How many members does MUFON have in the United States?
Worldwide.
Worldwide, okay.
We have, well, it varies. It's between 3,000 and 4,000. Right now, I believe it's at about 3,800 total worldwide. And it varies somewhat. I think in the United States we have closer to maybe 3,000, a little over 3,000 members. Don't quote me on that. I'm thinking that that's probably the case.
In your opinion, are UFO sightings going up, or are they kind of stabilizing?
They vary, and a lady by the name of well, I'm sorry, I haven't seen your moment, but a lady did a study of the MUFON data and the National UFO Reporting Center data and found that there are more UFO sightings in summer. Now, overall, I believe that UFO sightings are pretty much level. But I will say this, just on a street level and talking with social contacts, it seems to me that I'm hearing a great increase in numbers of people that are having experiencers that have either undergone abduction experiences or some kind of contact experience. And I think that my impression is that is becoming more and more common.
All right, Tom, please stand by, sir. You and I have to take our first break. Exonation, my guest is Tom Whitmore, and if you'd like more information about Tom, visit his blog, tomwhitmoreblog.wordpress.com, and Tom and I will be back on the other side of this break, and we're going to be talking about the infamous MJ12 papers. This is the X Zone. I am Rob McConnell, a place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. And we'll be back right after this very short commercial break. Don't go away. All right, Craig. Exonation, my guest this hour is Tom Whitmore. He is with MUFON. And if you'd like more information about Tom, visit his website, tomwhitmoreblog.wordpress.com. And for the information on MUFON, www.mufon.com. Tom, MJ12, what can you tell us about the MJ12?
Well, like I said, Rob, I've always been interested in history, and getting interested in espionage and intelligence work and even psychological warfare, I found that this was interfacing with the UFO community. And in the 1980s, there developed a pattern of interaction between the Air Force Office of Special Investigations and the Defense Intelligence Agency and certain UFO researchers and groups. And that trend resulted in part in the MJ12 documents coming into the public domain in the mid-1980s. Now, when I became actively involved in the UFO field around 1990, MJ12 and Roswell were very prominent in the UFO public at the time. And I believe personally that the trend in these questionable documents that have been introduced in the public domain has been occurring at least since the early 80s and continues up to the present time.
But isn't there a controversy out there when it comes to the MJ12 papers? There are people within the UFO community who say they're a fraud, they're a hoax, and then there are those who believe them to be real. How do you justify either side of this story?
Well, there are a couple of ways to look at it. For one thing, there's a possibility that there are certain people that were within the government hierarchy that were not happy with the UFO secrecy, and that they felt that some of this information should be disclosed to the public.
Okay.
But their dilemma was, how did they do it without breaking any laws, without disclosing confidential or classified information? And it's possible that the way that they did it was they created these questionable documents. Now, the documents, many of the documents, in fact, probably most of them, are not authentic. They're not genuine. But it's possible that they contain important information. For example, I could forge a letter to be purported by you, but it could contain correct information about you. So that is one possibility. Now, there are other explanations, such as the documents may have been issued in the 1980s in order to track Soviet spies, and there's a theory that they're just an out-and-out hoax, and so on and so forth. Now, I'm not claiming that any of the MJ12 documents are genuine, but I am extremely intrigued with the why. Why did this come about? And why has it basically been going on since the 80s up to the present time? Because in 2017, a document that I call the ultra top secret document came up on the internet, and it addresses MJ12 issues.
But just because it came up on the internet, how do we know there's any validity behind it? Because, I personally believe, Tom, that the internet is the largest septic tank that mankind has ever created there, because, in my opinion, there's more crap in it than anything else.
Yeah. And the internet and social media has completely changed the the approach that the intelligence agencies can take in terms of disseminating information. Now, in terms of this particular document, the ultra top secret documents, what I call it, it has a section that is the history of MJ-12, and I went straight to that, and it said that MJ-12 met at Flat Rock, Nevada, at a decommissioned naval air station. Well, I started looking on Nevada maps, and I couldn't find Flat Rock, Nevada anywhere. I've looked at state maps, highway maps, maps of Area 51, geology maps. There is no Flat Rock, Nevada. And also, I checked into any naval air stations. And there is one naval air station in Nevada, but it's in a completely different area. So those are red flags right there that tell you that there's something wrong with that document. Now, my approach is to study the subject and let the chips fall where they may. I'm not taking the position that the documents are genuine.
So you're acting as a real, true investigator. You're getting the facts, and you're letting the facts speak for themselves.
I'm trying.
Yeah, and that's commendable. I'm serious. I find that very commendable, because I've spoken to so many people over the 30 years doing this show that they go into an investigation with a biased opinion. Now, as a former police investigator myself, that's not how you do an investigation. You do the investigation to the best of the ability, find the facts, investigate every aspect, and like you said, that's how it's done. So what have you found out so far, using your investigative prowess, to substantiate that there may or may not be a UFO connection with the MJ-12 papers, that they may or may not be part of an intelligence operation in order to track Soviet spies?
Yes. Well, there is no smoking gun in terms of the reality of MJ-12.
Right.
But there are hints, and for example, I have one contact. I won't name his name right now. Of course not. But this person has told me that in his circles, they had heard about MJ-12 for years. There was also an interview done by Grant Cameron with a person by the name of Eric Walker, who apparently was involved in this kind of work. And Mr. Walker purportedly told Grant Cameron and another researcher that he had known about MJ-12 for 40 years. So these are little hints and little bits of information that we get that there might be truly something to it. Now,
I'm sorry, I was just going to ask you, is there any connection between Grant Cameron's book, Red Star Charlie, and MJ-12?
I haven't read his book. I've heard him tell a story about seeing the UFO and the UFOs up there in Canada. And I think that got him interested in the subject to the point that he decided to dig into things as much as he could. And he did do some commendable work in going to all of the presidential libraries, and which are part of the National Archives, by the way. And he went searching for information. But if MJ-12 does exist, or if it did exist, it's been very well hidden, and we're not going to find anything in publicly available documents. Now, in my work, I'm looking for clues. I don't expect to find a smoking gun. It would be fantastic if I did.
Right.
But I am looking for clues, and I've turned up a couple of interesting things.
What has been so far your most significant aha moment?
The so-called Eisenhower briefing document, which is a question document, and there have been many things that have been found wrong with it. But it's purportedly a briefing for President-elect Eisenhower before he took office. And the briefing document was dated November 18, 1952. I went to the Library of Congress, and the Library of Congress has the personal papers of General Nathan F. Twining. And Nathan F. Twining is an alleged MJ-12 member. I went through his daily logs. He had a secretary, of course, that wrote down everything everything he did during the day, who he met with, at what time,
Yeah.
and what occurred. I went through the entire 1952 year, and I'm going through day by day by day, January to July through September, October. I get to November 18, the same day that the Eisenhower briefing document is dated. And on that document, it shows that Nathan F. Twining met with, I believe, James Lay concerning President Eisenhower. And that gave me a jolt.
I guess it would.
It doesn't prove anything, but it certainly is an interesting correlation.
It certainly is. It certainly is. Is there a connection between the MJ-12 papers and what happened in Roswell?
Well, if you go by the Eisenhower briefing document, there is. And Richard Doty is another subject, but he claims to have been at a briefing in which they had film of the Roswell recovery, of the alleged Roswell recovery, which supposedly actually occurred near Corona, New Mexico, and at a location called Horse Mesa. It was actually two craft that crashed. And the thing is, Rob, if one or more saucers have been recovered with bodies, it's just almost certain that some kind of committee, some kind of secret group would have been formed to study it. And it's a big if. So if Roswell is real, then it's very likely that MJ-12 or something like it is real.
All right, stand by, please. That was my cue that we have to take our news break at the bottom of the hour. Exonation, Tom Whitmore is our guest. www.tomwhitmoreblog.wordpress.com. And we'll be back on the other side of this break as we continue this very interesting conversation on MJ-12, UFOs, and MUFON. If you'd like to contact anyone at MUFON, if you'd like to report a sighting of something you just can't explain in the skies, whether it's a UFO or UAP, visit www.mufon.com. I'll be back on the other side of this break. Don't go away. Exonation, Tom Whitmore is our special guest. Tom is one of the directors at MUFON. His website is tomwhitmoreblog.wordpress.com. And for all the information on MUFON, or if you'd like to report something in the sky that you believe is either a UFO or UAP, visit www.mufon.com. We've been talking a little bit about Richard Doty, former AFOSI special agent. Doesn't he have kind of a bad reputation?
Well, he did have a bad reputation in the 90s, and it partly arose out of a difficult situation that I think he was involved in with a person by the name of Paul Benowitz, and word got out about what was going on there. And also Richard Doty was associated with William Moore, a top UFO researcher at the time. And William Moore, in 1989 at the MUFON Symposium in Las Vegas, gave a sort of a confession presentation in which he admitted to trying to burrow his way into the military intelligence complex to learn as much as he could about UFOs. And in doing so, in a kind of relationship, he acted as an informant to AFOSI and possibly other groups. So Richard Doty was a contact of his, and actually Richard Doty recruited Bill Moore. And because of that association, I think there was a lot of ill feeling about that. Now, I'd also like to say that I'm not here to advocate for Richard Doty, but to be fair,
Yeah.
I think there was a lack of information about what really occurred at that time, and I think there were some misunderstandings about Doty's role. Doty was a special agent for the AFOSI, and he was under orders. He was doing what he was told to do.
Let's talk about the To the Stars Academy. What do you think about the current community, the UFO community, and the association with TTSA?
Well, I think we all in the UFO community were really excited when TTSA came out. And there's this very intriguing relationship that Tom DeLonge claims to have had with at least one top general in the DoD that was apparently feeding him information and giving him a green light to go public with this. I do think, though, unfortunately, that the way that To the Stars Academy has rolled out some of this information, that it's caused a lot of confusion. And I think because of that, there's some ill feeling in the UFO community. Even though I think there are a lot of people in the UFO community that view TTSA positively and still have a lot of hope that they're going to be coming out with important information in the future.
I have a bit of a problem understanding or actually putting any credibility into the disclosure issue, because here we are in a world that is run by computers, basically. And you have organizations like WikiLeaks who have brought forth documents on, presidential candidates, and you have other hackers who've broken in and stolen government information. And yet, if anybody wanted to cause a major coup within the American government, all they would have to do is hack a computer, get the information that was proof positive that UFOs are real, they are from another planet, that there has been government interaction with them, and that, they are here and we've known about it for years, and yet nobody's come out with that information.
Well, and WikiLeaks has released a lot of information, and some other hackers have done some interesting things. But I think we have to remember too, Rob, that there's a lot of information in the government that has not been hacked and that has not come out.
I agree.
And we have to realize too that if the UFO information exists, it's either very hard to get to, or it's very well hidden, or possibly doesn't exist at all. But going back to Richard Doty for a second, Richard Doty has said that after, and he said this in interviews, that after the Air Force got out of the UFO business in 1969, after the Condon report, that the Air Force went shopping around for another agency to take up the UFO problem, and the Defense Intelligence Agency did, and that the Defense Intelligence Agency became the clearinghouse for UFO information. So it's possible that whatever information is kept is somehow within the confines of the Defense Intelligence Agency. And Doty even said that the Defense Intelligence Agency even had a group that investigated abductions.
But to investigate something and to come to a conclusion based on that investigation are two different things.
Yeah.
But
we don't know what information they have.
And we don't even know if those investigations really happened.
Yes, that's right.
We
don't have confirmation.
Exactly. Exactly. When it comes to the Tic Tac video and the gun camera footage that kind of launched TTSA, thanks to the reporters at the what newspaper in New York was it? The New York Times. Yeah. There's a lot of controversy about this now. When you've got one of the questions that I had was, why the Navy? Why not the Air Force? How come no other branch of the military has reported these, only the Navy? How come none of the satellite defense systems picked up these Tic Tacs? There's so many questions that have yet to be answered, and yet so many people are taking the legitimacy of the sighting. I'm not saying that the sighting didn't happen. I'm just trying to justify how people jump to the conclusion that they have to be UFOs from another planet instead of just experimental aircraft that have been under development for several years, especially when we know for a fact that there has been experimental aircraft tested in that very area where this Tic Tac sighting was made. So how do we justify the jump from experimental terrestrial to something that is from outer space?
Yeah, it's possible that they are experimental or advanced aircraft that we don't know about.
Right.
But the problem with that, as I see it, is that the performance of these aircraft is so way beyond anything that our conventional technology is capable of that it tends to make me think that it may not just be advanced technology on our part. Now, we have to remember, too, that the pilots themselves saw these objects performing the maneuvers that they did that were way, way beyond anything that we know about at this time, at least publicly.
But
I think that their testimony, I think it's hard to discount their testimony.
Oh, I'm not trying to discount their testimony by any stretch of the imagination. What I am trying to say is that they themselves, and no one has been able to prove that they are not experimental aircraft, that we have not superseded what the public knows about the defense industry and what the defense industry has been capable to do without public knowledge up to this point. You know, we can point to the Aurora, we can point to the Pegasus launches, and so on and so forth. I'm saying that how can we make the positive assumption, and TTSA is doing a great job of this, by pointing the public with the media attention that they've gotten to this being proof of extraterrestrial existence.
Yeah, well, I agree with you. We should be careful in evaluating this, but another problem that we have is we actually have a very limited amount of information about it.
Yeah, that's true.
We have these little video clips that they show, of the object on the gun camera film, but there's much more video. There's much more footage of the behavior of these craft, but all we have are these little snippets, and we have the testimony of the pilots. We're dealing with limited information.
In the broadcast industry, you take a lot of footage, and what you do is you use the most tantalizing, the most sensationalistic footage to make your point. So you don't see the before and you don't see the after, and it's usually the footage before and after that really tells the story, not just what the editor wants you to see. You were also mentioning about the American government dropping their UFO investigations. I mean, the Air Force. Up here in Canada, the Canadian government has dropped it totally and put it in the lap of Chris Rutowski at the University of Manitoba. Yeah. Hey, listen, so when we come back, let's talk a little bit more, and thank you so much for coming on. This has been a great hour. Exonation, our guest this hour is Tom Whitmore, www.tomwhitmoreblog.wordpress.com, and Tom and I will be back as we wrap up this hour here in the X-Zone from our broadcast center and studios in Crystal Beach, Ontario, Canada. Don't forget www.xzbn.net for the X-Zone Broadcast Network, and for all the programming available to you on the X-Zone TV channel, www.simultv.com, where you can watch SimulTV now on Roku. Exonation, my guest this hour is Tom Whitmore, www.tomwhitmoreblog.wordpress.com. First of all, Tom, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. And as I told you during the commercial break, I have thoroughly enjoyed our discussion. And anytime you want to come back, the door is always open.
And thank you, Rob. It's been a delight to be on your show tonight.
Thank you, sir. Just before we went to the commercial break, I was mentioning that you were talking about how the United States Air Force kind of dropped the investigation of UFOs. And up here in Canada, the Canadian government dropped it, and they put it in the lap of Chris Rutowski at the University of Manitoba. What does this tell you, as an investigator, the attitude that both governments are taking?
Well, the Air Force had paid its dues from the 1940s through the 1950s and the 1960s, and they had to deal with the very thorny public relations issues involved with the UFO problem, and all kinds of things were going on. You know, you had the contactees like George Adamski and George Van Tassel and those types, and then you had the legitimate UFO sightings that were really of high strangeness. And then you had all the noise, you know, the people seeing Venus and all that. The Air Force had to deal with all that, and they were sick and tired of it because they were really in the business of defending this country.
That's right, yeah.
So they were looking for ways to get out of it, and they did. They did get out of it. Now, I think that we have to remember, and I'm quoting Richard Doty again, but according to him, the AFOSI investigates any UFO incidents that affect Air Force bases. Air Force bases, Air Force property, airplanes, or Air Force personnel. Now, the dichotomy that I see, the disconnect, is that almost certainly is true, and it makes sense. And yet, if Air Force pilots and other pilots report a UFO, it actually goes against their career, and they regret ever reporting it, and it could actually ground them and end up having a desk job instead of flying. So I see a real disconnect there. And I think since the Air Force has gotten out of the UFO business publicly, that they have made every effort to not get involved publicly in the UFO field at all. Now, they were forced to get back into it in the 1990s after the Roswell controversy came up. And Representative Stephen Schiff in New Mexico had been getting these complaints, and these complaints claims by people that were involved in the Roswell affair, and he was able to induce a GAO investigation. And then I think the Air Force had to cover their tracks, and they came out with this phone book-sized report claiming that the Roswell incident was probably caused by a mogul balloon. And the UFO community and the public came back and said, what about the bodies? Yeah. And they came out with a second report called Case Closed, in which they claimed that so-called crash dummies were responsible for these bodies reports. So in those efforts, the Air Force had, I think, from a UFO participant perspective, the Air Force had discredited itself. And some of the inside track on this is that if you ask the people that were involved in creating these reports, they admit they were doing what they were told.
Why is it then, if all the evidence is there, as so many UFO investigators believe it is, that we have been visited? 1947 was the focal point at that time. Roswell, New Mexico is the mecca of ufology. Betty and Barney Hill are legitimate. Travis Walton is legitimate. And the list goes on and on and on. That the government does have files. There are hidden craft and extraterrestrials at Area 51. If all this is legitimate, why is it then the government, and I'm going to put MJ-12 in there as well, why doesn't the government just come up and say, you know what, guys? They're here.
Well, there are a couple possibilities there. One is the information doesn't exist. In other words, there's nothing that the government has to disclose. I think that's unlikely.
Okay.
Secondly, if craft was recovered and bodies, and possibly more than one, possibly several. They have basically been lying to the American public since the 1940s and saying that there's nothing to it. So they're in a really difficult position if they come out now and say, well, we want to tell you that there is really something to this and we do have proof. Well, that's going to create a very awkward situation, to say the least. A third possibility is that there's bad news in this.
I see.
That there are things that people are not going to want to hear, and you get into the business of being careful what you ask for, because you may not like the answers that you get. And that could possibly be a reason why there has not been more disclosure.
Is it possible that even if the President of the United States came out and said, listen, they're here, that people wouldn't believe him? Or that other leaders of other countries would come out and say they're here, that nobody would actually believe them?
Yeah, and things have gotten so confused now with the internet and this 24-hour news cycle and partisan-type news reporting and fake news. It's almost getting to the point to where people don't know what to believe. And I'll tell you personally, when I see a news report, I often just take it with a grain of salt, because I don't have the time and the energy to investigate all of that and find out what the facts really are. It wouldn't surprise me in the least if, even if a certain amount of disclosure or confirmation occurred, that a lot of people wouldn't even accept it, wouldn't believe it.
Do you think disclosure will eventually happen?
I don't know. Some people think that it is going to happen eventually. I personally have the theory that this information has been introduced into the public through a backdoor process, through these questionable documents.
Right.
And what's happened, and Grant Cameron says this all the time, and I agree with him, that these documents are created in such a way that they always provide plausible deniability. There's always something wrong with them. But at the same time, there is certain information in these documents that is seeping into the public domain, into the public consciousness. And if you consider what people think is possible today compared with, say, 50 years ago, it's completely different. The public is, I believe, much more acclimated to the idea that we've been visited by non-terrestrial parties.
Over my years doing the show, I've interviewed many authors, and they have told me point blank, if they want to get a point across, they will do it in a fictional book rather than in a biography, because people are more tended and more open to the possibility when reading a fictional book. So you add a little bit of truth, you add a little bit of fiction, and you add and this is I guess basically what you're saying about the MJ-12 papers. Yeah,
and also people in military and intelligence that have a lot of classified background and classified experience in classified programs. A lot of times they end up writing novels because they can't get the information cleared by the censors in DOD, in a nonfiction format. So they end up writing it in a fictional format. And that's how it gets into the public domain.
My final question, and we're running out of time very fast. I've got about a minute and a half here. What do you see for the UFO field going into the year 2020?
Well, and I just think the UFO field has always been difficult. Groups don't cooperate. People don't cooperate. Some people do. But it would be fantastic if we could somehow all get together and pool our information.
Isn't it? Yeah.
And I think that social media certainly provides a possibility for people to cooperate more. Unfortunately, a lot of people are misusing social media, and it's creating division, and it's creating discord. I think we just have to keep at it and do the best that we can with the resources we have, and keep working at it and be patient.
Tom, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. Thank you for the investigations that you're doing and the professionalism that you bring to the table. It is sincerely appreciated. Please keep up the big work, the great work that you're doing. and let our listeners know once again how they can find out more about you and the work that you're doing.
Yes, you can read my blog at tomwhitmoreblog.wordpress.com, and you can message me there. I'm also on Facebook, Tom Whitmore. You can friend me, and we can communicate by Facebook Messenger. And Rob, I want to thank you again for having me on your show. It's been really great. I've really enjoyed it.
It's been my great pleasure. I look forward to the next time you visit us, Tom. Please don't be a stranger.
Okay, thank you.
Merry Christmas, Tom.
Merry Christmas to you.
Exonation, Tom Whitmore. Once again, Tom Whitmore, blog.wordpress.com. And don't forget, MUFON, MUFON.com. I'll be back on the other side of this commercial break with the news as we continue here in the X Zone from our broadcast center in after 30 years saying Hamilton every night, let me try that one again. From our broadcast center and studios in Crystal Beach, Ontario, Canada, right on the shores of Lake Erie. The X Zone will continue on the other side of this break. And just before I go, don't forget, if you'd like to get your top box of Simul TV's great packages, all you need to do is go to their website at www.simultv.com. I'm Rob McConnell. This is the X Zone. Don't go away.